To build an app on Farcaster, you do get powerful APIs and full social protocol access, but tapping into its event streams, live bot mentions, user metrics would require you to either operate a full Snapchain node or to wire up a complex set of webhooks and polling. But what if it told you there's a plug-and-play SDK and a hosted API that will let you skip all this infra and directly jump into shipping your application? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today by introducing you all to Neynar. Neynar provides you with a complete developer platform for Farcaster, including APIs, SDKs, webhook, all designed to make the protocol more accessible and production ready for builders. It abstracts away the complexities of the network layer, giving you a real-time access for data such as user data, cast, interactions, and more with a clean SDK. What really stands out is the developer experience. Neynar SDK is designed to be more intuitive. You can go from reading the docs to shipping something live within minutes. Whether you're building a bot, analytical dashboard, or an app that extends Farcaster's social layer, Neynar gives you both power and simplicity in one place. To put that in practice, we'll be building a bubble map, an application that is more visual and also fun. So let's get to it. The idea is to build an interactive map that visualizes your Farcaster connections, your followers, people you follow, mutual connections, all as animated and interactive bubble. What's even better is the entire workflow from getting users and followers data to updating live bubble map when the relationship changes is powered by Neynar. The SDK handles the authentication, fetching user data, and live event syncing so that we can focus purely on the experience and shipping the application. Sounds interesting, right? So let's see it in action. Okay, so before we jump into the code, we'll actually see what we're going to be building today. Okay, so I have the homepage pulled up over here and we have a simple button called sign in with Farcaster. So if I click on this, it will open up a new page and it will prompt me to scan the QR code from my Farcaster app. So you can either sign in using Farcaster using this particular QR code or open the URL directly in Farcaster application using preview mode and experience the application. So let me open my Farcaster and actually open this in preview mode and actually show that to you how everything works. All right. So I have a simple ngrok URL over here. Okay. I'm going to open preview tool, paste that ngrok URL, which is pointing to my localhost 3000 and open this as a mini app. This should take a second to load up the entire thing. So you will get this warning. You can click on hide splash. Okay. So since we're opening it in Farcaster, it automatically detects that you are a Farcaster user and automatically signs you in. But if you open that in a normal browser, as we saw before, it will prompt you to scan the QR and sign in as a Farcaster user. Okay. So as you can see over here, we have our graph pulled up. So the orange line is my follower. The blue line is the people who I'm following. And the green line are the mutual people I have in my following list. So this was the entire thing that we did. And now first let's go visit the Neynar console and create our application there so that we can get their API key and the client ID, which is required to develop the application. All right, so I'm in the Neynar homepage. I'm going to click on login. So I'm already logged in, so it might take me to my dashboard directly. Okay, so since we're in the dashboard over here and I'm going to click on home. So when I click on home, you can see already have something called bubble map created over here. It's a simple application that we can create. So to create a new app, you can click on apps over here and create a new app. Since I already have bubble map, I'm going to click on this existing app over here. And as we can see, my app name, the logo URL that I've provided, some random logo URL. Okay. And here is my API key and here's my client ID. So client ID can be public. It doesn't matter, but make sure API key is secure. So I'm not going to toggle this. I'm going to just copy this and also client ID as well. Okay. So we'll paste this in the env of our project so that we can securely maintain it. All right. Moving on to the code list. All right. Now that we saw the demo, let's actually jump into the code. The first thing we would do is install these packages that is listed over here. These are a couple of Neynar SDKs and some utilities. That's the query and D3. So D3 here would help us build that bubble map layout for the graph. Okay. Coming to the code, I have a very simple Next.js project set up here and a couple of pre-built components as well. One of those things is bubble graph and the graph loader. So these are some of the animation code that is built using D3, which is a bit of out of scope for this video. So we'll keep that aside for now. Okay, so we'll just use it in the code and you can also get this from the repo. Moving on, the first thing we would do is go to the providers. So in my providers, I already have the React query provider set up. Now we'll actually set up the Neynar provider, because if you want to use Neynar SDKs within your React application, you have to make sure your application is wrapped by its provider. So the first thing we would do is import the context provider, the theme, and other necessary imports. And the first thing we would do is we would actually get the Neynar context provider wrapped up and also pass the client ID. And you already saw how to get the client ID and make sure to save it in the env. And we would go with the light theme for now. And then you would set up the mini app provider because we are building mini app and this will give you all the other utilities required for a Farcaster mini application. And then we just pass the children. Okay. That's all with the provider. Easy to set up and ready to use. Now moving on to the page. In the page, this is where we'll actually have the main application. I just have a simple header right now calling social graph, Farcaster social graph. But before we actually complete the page, let's first write the API that will actually fetch the details from Farcaster and give it to us. Okay, for that, I have something called API/graph. So this will be the endpoint that will fetch all the followers, basically the relationship details of the user and give it to us. So we could go here and we have a post endpoint over here. So we could just import whatever, all the things that are required. The first thing is we're importing get Neynar client. So if we go inside lib get Neynar client, it's just a simple instantiation of the Neynar client. So we are instantiating the new API client and passing the API key, which you did see how to get the API key as well. Okay, now coming back over here, the first thing you do is define a try catch block because it's an async function. It's important. And then error handling. Okay, so we're going to do some error handling. We are actually making sure that we get the proper message, and that's the reason there are some of the additional code over here. All right, the first thing you do is get all the body details from the API. Okay, the FID of the user and the limit, which if not provided will default to 100. And we would define get the client in our client and then safe limit so that we don't cross beyond 100 or lesser than 25. Okay, just keep everything efficient. All right. And here's the thing. So this is what we'll do. So we'll do client dot fetch users followers. So the client we're getting from the Neynar, okay, using our API key. And then the first thing we do is fetch user followers and then fetch users following. So we get both of these things and we would do a parallel request so that we don't waste resources. And then we would normalize all the users and then we would get total the next normalized followers and then the following of a particular user. All right. And then we get the mutuals of the users as well. And then we would return that. So basically we're getting all the followers, the following and the mutuals, okay, within the same API and within the same parallel call. Now moving on to the page.tsx, the first thing we would do here is import everything that we need. So we'll be importing the bubble graph, we'll be importing use MiniApp, use Neynar context, other things from the Neynar React SDK. And we'll also import use query from React query so that we can make an API call. Okay, and then the graph loader, basically it's a loading screen indicator before loading the graph. All right. The next thing we will do is we will check if the SDK is loaded, okay, or not, or is it still building up. So we'll check that, and then we'll check the context of the mini app that will be running, and then we'll get the Neynar context user. So whichever the user who's logged in, we will get their details here. All right. So here you get the effective FID. So what I did here was that since we had user ID coming in from context as well as user, so we'll just pick whichever one is available. Okay. And the next thing we would do is we would try to call to that API. We would call using query key. We'll define the function that will actually make a fetch call post request to the API graph that we have over here. Okay. With the JSON body that is FID. All right. And we'll also make sure that we only enable this API when the effective FID is actually available, or else we won't make that API call. All right. The next thing we would do is if the effective ID is available, all right, we just say you're signed in and here's your FID. If not, we would actually prompt them to sign in with Farcaster, then explore followers, some subtext over there. And then what we would do next is we would actually see if the effective ID is not available, and if the SDK is loaded, we would actually show them a text like open inside of Farcaster to auto detect, and basically some message showing up here. If in case the SDK is still loading, we would actually say loading mini app context, please wait. Okay, and we also have something called Neynar auth button. This is one of the beauty of Neynar. So basically this one component that is imported from Neynar over here would allow you to plug and play sign in with Farcaster. So this will give you a button. You can obviously pass Tailwind class names or maybe your CSS or inline styles, whatever you like, and customize it according to your need. So this one button will enable you to plug and play sign in with Farcaster. So basically with this one button, you'll be done with implementing the Farcaster authentication end to end. Okay, everything is handled, sessions, everything. So that's what we're doing. And the next thing we would do is we would actually check if the effective FID is available and is the API call loading. So are we fetching the details? If yes, we're going to show the loading indicator of the bubble map. If in case the effective FID is available and if the entire thing is loaded, then what we would do is we'll check if the loading is false and if the data is available, and if there's no error, we'll just display the bubble graph. Okay, we'll pass the followers, following, mutuals, and also the center user. Center user is nothing but the signed in user who is actually using the application, and we'll just pass some of the details so that we can also show their avatar in the center. All right, so this was the entire implementation, and as you can see, it was just a few couple of hooks and a couple of providers and a couple of lines of code. We were able to implement everything, which might have taken a couple of complexities to implement with just Farcaster APIs. Moving on, let's talk about some of the use cases that you can build using Neynar SDKs. All right, now that we had good experience with the SDKs, here are some ideas or use cases to help you get started to build your own application on Neynar. The first thing is engagement bot. The bots which would reply intelligently or moderate discussions or assist users in real time. Analytical dashboard. A dashboard that visualizes engagement or give you user metrics or maybe trends among the Farcaster ecosystem. All can be done using Neynar SDK. Integrations. Maybe you can bring in Notion, Discord, Slack, or any other integrations which can unlock a lot more potential. Notification system. Send real-time updates based on event triggers such as mentions or cast or some sort of user interaction. These are some of the status idea you can build around Neynar SDK, but you can always deep dive and think about how Neynar can be helpful for your use case. Moving on. With Neynar, you're not limited by the infrastructure, but empowered by the abstraction. By lowering the barrier for the entry and giving developers a ready-to-use SDKs and APIs, Neynar is transforming Farcaster from a raw protocol to a launchpad for creativity. That's why we are so excited to build with it, and the Connection Bubblemap was just the beginning of the story.